The cross-border chaos is no longer just a diplomatic talking point hiding in corporate earnings calls. It is carving a massive 3,300-kilometer trench right through the heart of North America's energy grid. What began in 2025 as a brutal trade war and a consumer backlash has evolved into something far more permanent. Canada is no longer just boycotting American goods. It is aggressively rewiring its entire national infrastructure to cut the United States out of the loop. Welcome back to your ultimate pit stop, Piston Pundit. By late summer of 2026, the temporary anger over tariffs has transformed into a multi-billion-dollar fortress of sovereignty, impacting everything from the groceries on the shelf to the fuel powering your next vehicle. The warning for the automotive world is massive. When a top-tier trade partner decides it can no longer trust your borders, the supply chain shifts from a shared highway to a divided continent. So, let's break down the 5 biggest signals showing how this economic realignment is permanently changing the market, and why America now faces a historic energy shift. Starting at number 5, the 2025 tariff shockwave and the $155 billion backlash. To understand this massive infrastructure pivot, we have to look at the economic earthquake that shattered the trust. In February 2025, the U.S. initiated a punishing trade war, slapping a sweeping 25% tariff on most Canadian imports and a devastating 10% tariff specifically on energy products. Canada did not just absorb the blow, it fired back with a massive $155 billion wave of retaliatory tariffs. This marked the largest trade shock in nearly a century. Even though the U.S. Supreme Court eventually struck down several of those emergency tariffs by early 2026, the damage was completely irreversible. Analysts at Oxford Economics highlighted that these policy shifts have prompted deep structural changes in the Canadian economy. For automakers and parts suppliers relying on just-in-time manufacturing across the Detroit-Windsor corridor, the lesson was brutal. A border that was once invisible suddenly became a financial barricade. And for Canada, the realization set in. They could never leave their economy fully exposed to American political whims again. Moving to number 4, the $3 billion food fortress. Before we talk about oil, we need to talk about survival. Because Canada's push for sovereignty did not just stop at steel and aluminum, it went straight to the dinner table. In the summer of 2026, Prime Minister Mark Carney unveiled Canada's first ever national food security strategy, backed by a massive $3 billion commitment. The goal is clear: strengthen food sovereignty, expand domestic processing, and reduce reliance on imported U.S. goods as grocery prices spiked nearly 35% since 2019. This 10-year plan heavily targets the highly concentrated grocery sector by funding new infrastructure, greenhouses, and hydroponics. Carney made the national stakes absolutely clear, stating that a country that cannot feed or fuel itself is not truly sovereign. For the auto industry, this is a massive storytelling button. When a government starts heavily subsidizing vertical farms and domestic distribution networks just to secure its food supply, you know they are applying that exact same defense mechanism to raw materials, critical minerals, and battery supply chains. Sovereignty is the new efficiency. Which brings us to number 3, the Enbridge vulnerability and the infrastructure wake-up call. If food is the foundation, energy is the engine. And right now, Canada's energy engine has a glaring vulnerability. Currently, Canada does have a west-to-east oil link, but it is deeply compromised by geography. The Enbridge mainline transports crude from Alberta, but it dips down into the U.S. Midwest before crossing back into Canada at Sarnia, Ontario. In 2024, that route moved around 733,000 barrels per day, meaning the absolute lifeblood of Eastern Canada's energy grid is subject to American jurisdiction and U.S. border tariffs. When that 10% energy tariff hit in 2025, it acted as a massive wake-up call. The current pipeline setup became an unacceptable geopolitical liability. For automakers, factory operators, and logistics fleets, this kind of instability is a nightmare. You cannot plan a decade-long transition to electric vehicles or maintain massive domestic manufacturing hubs when your primary energy feed can be held hostage by a trade dispute. Canada realized it needed an escape route. Now, number 2, the Northern Shield Proposal and 3,300 kilometers of independence. This brings us to the most massive infrastructure retaliation of the decade. In July 2026, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Ontario Premier Doug Ford officially mapped out the Northern Shield Energy Corridor. This is a proposed 3,300-kilometer crude oil pipeline designed to run directly from Hardisty, Alberta, through Saskatchewan and Manitoba, straight to the refining hub of Sarnia, Ontario, completely bypassing the United States. According to the Ontario government, this is a nation-building project meant to reduce reliance on foreign markets and strengthen national security. The province is already backing an $11 million feasibility study expected to finish by the end of 2026 to figure out the exact commercial models and environmental integration. Premier Ford did not hold back, framing this as an immediate imperative to protect Canadian jobs and keep Canadian energy in Canadian hands. This is not just a pipeline. This is a physical declaration of economic independence. It is an east-west steel artery designed to bleed out the historical north-south reliance. Before we hit the most critical takeaway for the global market, do us a favor and hit the like button, subscribe to Piston Pundit, and turn on notifications. It helps us reach more auto enthusiasts, gearheads, and viewers who want the real, unvarnished story behind these massive market moves. Now, let's shift gears into the final, heaviest impact. Number 1, the new energy reality and the realignment of the auto world. The scale of this pipeline is what truly terrifies the legacy trade establishment. The Northern Shield is projected to transport 500,000 barrels of oil per day right out of the gate, with a built-in capacity to expand up to 800,000 barrels per day. This is roughly 6 times the volume of Ontario's current U.S. imports, meaning this excess capacity is not just for domestic use. It lays the groundwork for a massive new export hub, potential strategic petroleum reserves, and even access to global maritime markets. For the automotive industry, this completely rewrites the playbook. Automakers rely heavily on regional energy stability for everything from powering assembly plants to maintaining affordable freight networks and predictable consumer fuel prices. When 500,000 barrels of oil are rerouted to a fully sovereign, entirely domestic corridor, it changes the pricing dynamics and the geopolitical leverage of the entire continent. If Canada can successfully insulate its oil and gas from U.S. interference, they will aggressively apply that exact same blueprint to their lithium, cobalt, nickel, and the entire EV battery supply chain. The auto world is right in the middle of a massive continental divorce. The verdict here goes far beyond a boycott. We are witnessing a permanent realignment. The biggest takeaway here is that what started as a reactionary boycott in 2025 has permanently mutated into a structural realignment by 2026. The political anger over a 25% tariff has settled, but the infrastructure shifts are just beginning. The $3 billion food security strategy proves that Canada is actively working to eliminate supply chain vulnerabilities at every single level of society. And the 3,300-kilometer Northern Shield pipeline proposal is not just about moving crude oil from Alberta to Ontario. It is about severing a historical vulnerability and building an untouchable domestic economy. For the automotive world, the lesson is written on the wall. Vehicles, factories, and supply chains do not exist in a vacuum. They run on energy, materials, and trade routes. When a country decides it would rather spend billions to dig a 3,300-kilometer trench than rely on a neighbor's infrastructure, the entire market feels it through the chassis. Politics can absolutely hit demand like a brutal downshift, but permanent infrastructure changes the race completely. So, now we want to hear from you. Do you think the Northern Shield pipeline will actually be built, or is it just political posturing? Could Canada's pivot toward absolute energy and food sovereignty eventually make it the dominant player in the North American auto supply chain? And should automakers be aggressively restructuring their own logistics to match this east-west shift? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. For the latest updates on the automotive world, economic shifts, and more in-depth analysis, Subscribe to Piston Pundit and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. You can now check out any of the videos on the screen. There's plenty more to explore.